Hi, and welcome to the second edition of Spirit Time, brought to you by Heavenly Spirits. I'm Daniel Cooney.
And I'm Christine Cooney.
This is part 2 of French Whisky in our series of training videos designed to be shared with our American distribution partners and anyone else interested in learning about quality French spirits. During this episode, we'll be tasting 4 Armorik single malt expressions, including the core line of Classic, Sherry, Double Maturation, and the lightly peated Triagoz expression.
In French Whisky Part 1, we presented an overview of the current state of French whisky, including some history and facts. Today, we are very pleased to have David Roussier, owner of Distillarie Warengham, join us via Zoom to taste and to talk about his family-owned distillery located in Brittany, France, where they produce Armorik single malt whiskies. We have asked David to give us a quick overview of the Warengham distillery and then walk us through each of these delicious Celtic, Breton, French whiskies.
Hi, David.
Hi, David. Welcome to Spirit Time. How are you?
I'm fine. And you?
Pretty busy. As you can see, trying to make videos and, a new era of communication. So
We just
Exactly. Video masterclasses.
Yeah.
We're all learning. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us on this training video. We're happy to have you as our first guest, and hopefully we'll have more if this thing keeps going. Would you mind giving us a quick overview of your distillery and tell us what you do there?
Yeah, sure. So the Warengham Distillery is a family business. It was built in 1900 by Léon Warengham, a guy who came from the north of France to settle in Brittany and start a distillery. So at first we were making only fruit and plant liqueurs. Our main product was an elixir, a bit like Chartreuse. And for the next 80 years, we will be producing only liqueurs. Until my father-in-law, Gilles Lesour, joined the company in 1981. And he had to find new ideas to save the business. And that's when he came up with the idea of whiskey making, because France has always been one of the biggest whiskey market in the world. And we in Brittany, we have the same Celtic roots, the same culture, the same music as the Scots and the Irish. So if there is one region where it makes sense to make whiskey in France, that's definitely Brittany. So he went to Scotland and learned how to make whiskey, and he decided to create the first whiskey distillery in France. So it started, the first whiskey bottles were sold in 1987. In 1998, we launched Armorik, the first French single malt, which you have a few expressions in front of you right now.
We do?
Yeah.
No, I said yes, we do.
Mhm.
Yes, we do.
So,
Do we start tasting?
Oh,
Wait,
sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, he's not done yet.
Distillery.
Oh.
Talk about the distillery.
Sorry. She wants
Yeah,
more
but-
details.
Maybe just a few details about how we produce Armorik. We were right from the start. We were pretty much influenced by the Scottish tradition. So we use malted barley, French barley only, and for the last 5-6 years now, we're using only organic French barley.
Oh,
It's
nice.
malted in Belgium. And then we do everything on site at the distillery. We have copper pot stills like the ones you can see in Scotland. We are one of the only distilleries in France to actually have a proper whiskey designed pot stills. And then we mature the whiskey in our warehouse in Brittany, not really far from the sea, maybe 5-10 kilometers from the sea. So we benefit from that, seashore climate. We use mainly ex-bourbon cask, sherry cask, and as you will see in the double maturation, we also use French oak cask from the local forest of Brittany. So yeah, that's
pretty much what we do. I don't know if you have any specific questions, maybe Dan and Kristin.
Well, I think it's important to also mention that the distillery sits on its own water source.
Sure.
I think we like to hear that. It's you have everything you need to really make whiskey where you are, where the distillery is. So,
And that spring water makes a difference in the taste.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also one of the elements that makes Britain whiskey, Armorik whiskey, so unique. Unlike the rest of France, we don't have the same soil in Brittany. It's very granitic compared to the rest of France. So we have a water that doesn't have exactly the same minerals, the same characteristics. So that influences the taste of the whiskey and the aromas of Armorik. That's one of the elements that we used to have the IGP that you talked about in the first part.
Okay.
good. Well, should we begin tasting?
Shall we taste? Do you have your own bottles there, I guess?
I do actually. I do. That's the classic.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Shall we
All
start
right.
with the classic? Does that make sense?
Yeah, usually that's the one to start with.
Okay. Well, we're going to leave you the floor, and you can just walk us through what is the classic. Why do you call it classic? And then, we'll take a couple of minutes, and then we'll move on to the next one. We'll see how that goes. All right.
Sure. So the Armorik Classic, the main idea behind this Armorik was to present an Armorik that was really true to how it comes out from the stills. So in the Armorik Classic, you have the real Armorik style. So it's matured in ex-bourbon cask, not only first fill cask, but quite a few refilled casks, so that we can really preserve the aromas from the distillate. So this Armorik Classic is pretty much I would call it an aperitif whiskey, very, very fresh, very easy drinking, very round, with a lot of vanilla aromas, a little bit of sweetness, yes, and also the typical fruitiness that you get from Armorik. I mean, all Armoriks are designed to be very, very fruity, and I guess in this Armorik Classic, you really have that fruitiness and that sweetness coming over.
Are you tasting, David?
It's aperitif time for you. For us, it's 11 in the morning. Although
Perfect time to taste.
she always tells me Friday at 11 is the best time to taste.
For French aperitif, I would say maybe in an hour or so, but I mean, there is no wrong time.
You can call it work, right?
Yes, that's my word. So yeah, I actually can't see you, but are you tasting as well?
Yes, we are.
There we go. It's true.
You can't see us because the camera is over there. That's why.
We're still trying to figure out these arrangements in the studio, but we're just around the corner. We can see you, and I think the camera can see you.
That's the main thing, is to see you, because that's where people are going to look.
And we are enjoying
very
it.
Nice, yeah. This is very, very nice.
It's always been one of my favorites. I see it as a kind of just well-rounded, like you said, an aperitif. End of the day,
a couple of
treat.
tasting
It's
notes,
just
a couple of tasting notes for, what do you think? What kind of notes do you get out of that classic?
Well, usually I have the typical fruity notes that you'll find in every young Armorik. These apple, pears, so that kind of fruitiness. A little bit of peach as well, because I guess when the fruits combine with the sweetness, it leans towards peach and some sort of apricots, these kind of things. There's a little bit of wood also, the woodiness coming from the ex-bourbon cask.
Is there a hint of smoke that I'm getting, or not? I've heard other people say that. Is it in the middle palate, just a hint of smoke? No.
It doesn't come from peat, but most probably from the charring of the casks.
Okay.
But yes, you can get that tiny, smoky, peppery note coming as well.
Yeah, I like that. It's
All right,
interesting.
let's move on to the sherry cask.
Four.
The sherry finish, I'm sorry.
The sherry finish. Yeah, also called sherry cask. You can find it called sherry cask in some places.
Okay. Well, because, yeah.
Oh, that's what they call it in the European bottling. Sherry cask.
Exactly. Actually, technically, if you like it, I can show you the European packaging that will soon come into the US, hopefully.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we've talked to our customers about the new packaging because now we're showing the 10-year-old and the Pinot de Charente finish. So we've been telling them this is the new packaging that's coming soon. So they're warned, and a lot of people like it actually. So we're very pleased.
Good, excellent.
Talk to us about the sherry.
Yeah, so sherry cask. It's the same, pretty much the same concept as with the classic, but with other casks. The idea again was to make a very easy drinking whiskey, like again aperitif whiskey, end of the day, but maybe for a little colder evenings. So it's been matured in sherry cask that we get from Spain, Oloroso sherry cask, and it's spent quite a few years in these casks, and it gets all that spiciness, actually a little more woody than the classic. And the fruits there, they transform themselves to be a little more, how you call that? Kind of baked fruit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that English, if the English is good, but
there is some bourbon cask in this, or just sherry?
no, they're in the vatting. We use a little bit of bourbon cask, so you have a tiny little note of vanilla aromas coming as well. But most of the vatting is from sherry.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, it all depends on the batch. Technically, some batches there is more of 100% sherry matured whiskey. In some of them, we use bourbon matured, finished in sherry cask. The main idea is to remain
Round it off.
In the aromas of the sherry cask.
Yeah,
right.
That's delicious.
Yeah.
I know, Christine, you've mentioned the mouthfeel of this is something you
very,
enjoy.
We
it's a
feel
little
like
different.
it's very buttery and creamy. It just coats the mouth really, really nicely, and we like it a lot.
Yeah, that creaminess that I usually call it oiliness, but I think creamy is better. It comes from the stills we have. We've tried to do some experiments on the stills, moving the line arm up and down, but our stills, they were meant to have this shape, and this shape makes that oiliness that you find in all the whiskeys. But yeah, you're right. In the sherry cask, it's quite nice.
That's good.
Let's move to the double maturation.
Yep.
Kind of the star of the line, at least in the US.
Yes. Pretty much everywhere, I guess. The double maturation is really the flagship of the distillery. And then it's also very, it's one whiskey we really like at the distillery because that's one of the whiskey where we are the most Britain we can be. Because in this double maturation, we use a Britain oak cask. So we work with the last cooper of Brittany. He makes cask especially for us using oaks that were grown in the nearby forest. And we're the only one to use these casks, and they get really, really good results with Armorik. So usually what we would do is first maturation, usually in ex-bourbon cask, and then first maturation in Britain oak cask.
Okay, you confused me. Yeah.
and then in sherry cask, because the Britnell cask, if you don't mature the whiskey for like 10 years, it will leave it will give a nice structure, but not that much aromas to the whiskey. So we need to make a double maturation, second maturation in sherry cask to bring more fruitiness, a little more roundness also to the whiskey.
And the sherry cask is first fill on that one, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. First
I
fill.
find that creaminess again from the sherry. I think it just comes at the end. It just finishes very well. I like that one very much. So
Well,
do many
the
people.
word I hear a lot in describing it is its complexity compared to the others. It's just got so much going on. It's not as easy to sort of break down in a simple palate, but it's just a lot of stuff going on. So it makes you question it and say, wow, what's that taste? Where's that coming from?
And I'm quite convinced that the complexity comes from the maturing in new oak cask. You know,
Brittany.
these British oak cask, brand new. They have never seen anything before in the cask, so we get all the tannins. We get a little bit of vanillin as well coming. So yeah, that definitely makes the complexity of the double maturation. And the nice story about that Britain oak cask is that the cooper we have in Brittany is planning his retirement, and we are actually thinking about taking over the cooperage from him to
Wow.
make sure we can have our own Britain oak cask in the future.
That's exciting. And well, you're the only one currently using wood from this particular cooperage from that forest. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So why not? Yeah, that's great to have more control of it and ensure that you have it in the future going ahead, right?
Yeah, and then we make sure that the knowledge of cooperage doesn't leave Brittany. I mean, France is known for cooperages, but not Brittany, and that would be nice to keep a little bit of that know-how in Brittany itself.
Right.
Very unique product. Very unique to Armorik, to Warengham, really.
Delicious.
So
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that it was voted number 6 on the top 20 list just 2 years ago in Whiskey Advocate magazine. We're very happy to
number
get
1
that
French whiskey in the US.
Yeah.
So last but not least, yeah, we like to brag about this.
That's our job.
I'd like to do that too.
Last but not least, we have the Triagoz, which was a small batch, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
It was a 2,000 bottles limited release when we brought it. And can you briefly talk about it?
Yeah, sure. The Triagoz is based on an experiment we did quite a long time ago. I wanted to try distilling some heavily peated malted barley. So we tried that like 5 or 6 years ago, and now the whiskey has come to an age where we can bottle it. The thing is, we didn't really want to confuse people into, Armorik is unpeated. It's very fruity, very round and creamy, as we saw in the 3 previous bottlings. So we didn't want to make a heavily peated Armorik. To us, that wouldn't make sense. So what we decided to do is to make an Armorik with the specific character people expect from Armorik, but with a little touch of peat. So we've added, I think that was 18% of heavily peated whiskey we have. With the rest was based on the classic, so pretty much the same vatting using ex-bourbon cask. And to me, it makes a very, very nice Armorik Classic with that peat coming back in the mid palate and the finish, and that's a nice limited edition, I would say.
I think it's delicious. I like peat, not always the big salty dirt mouth fill of an Isla, say, for example. But sometimes they do. But sometimes you just want a little more than just your well-rounded Scotch-style whiskey, something with a little bit more dirt in it. And this does it. I think it's a great balance. And I'm glad you did this. On the other hand, I wouldn't mind if you took it a little step further just for fun, just to have it in our portfolio, something with a little bit more, a little bit more meat to it, in the peat department. That would be fun. Any chance of that coming down the pike?
Yeah. We're working on that. We're really working hard. Again, the idea was to make sure that Armorik is unpeated and that everyone understand that it's fruity, rich, and but we really want to, continue playing with peat. So we've decided to launch a new brand. So it will come in September. And it will be our first heavily peated whiskey, so 100% based on 50 ppm barley. But it might be a little different from what people expect from, let's say, Isla. We've tried to, distill it, maturate a little differently, so to make a unique whiskey. Because there wouldn't be any point doing exactly the same as what they do in Scotland. So.
Oh no, I agree with you. No, that's Isla's Isla, and Brittany's Brittany.
Exactly. So we made a Britain peated whiskey. The first people who tasted it were actually quite surprised by what we managed to achieve. But let's keep it for the future.
Yes. Well, that's we have a few other expressions, as you know. We have also the Armagnac finish that we did kind of together. We have the Pinot de Charente finish that we also sell here. We don't have enough time to talk about all of them today. Maybe we'll do another session and talk about more when the newly peated one come in. That would be a good idea. So that was a very interesting.
Yeah, and thank you. This was a great way to spend a Friday at 11 a.m. With you, David. Thank you so much, and I hope that the information that we got out of this we can share with everyone. And I hope the recording worked.
we have one more question, Matt. Knowing that there are currently about 70 distilleries making French whiskey in France, what in your mind makes you different and keeps you ahead of the competition? What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. There's obviously one thing no one will take over from us is that we were the first. We were the first to make whiskey in France. We're from Brittany, and that makes a difference. I mean, all the Britain whiskies are different from the rest of the French whiskies. And I think Armorik has a huge advantage over other people is that we have huge stock. I mean, we have been distilling for the past 30 years. We have some whiskeys that are not far from, getting to 20 years old and so on. So we started using age statement 2 years ago with the first Armorik 10 years old, and I think we will continue in the future. I would love to have the whole range around 10. That would be nice, and we're working a lot to reach that. I mean, we've increased production a lot. So yeah, in the future that will come. The other advantage we have is that we're, I would say, medium-sized. I mean, we're obviously very, very small compared to Scottish distilleries, but we have a size which is enough so that we can invest and do a lot of research, using new cask, using new cereals. So we're trying to experiment quite a lot of things. We've also moved the whole production to organic. So from 2021 onwards, Armorik whiskies will all be organic.
Great.
Which
Wow.
That's really
I-
nice.
Yeah, I think we are the only one in France to be able to have that level of production with organic whiskey. You have other people doing organic, but they're usually very, very small. Some of them are farmers. We're able to move the whole production towards organic. So I
Fantastic.
look forward to
Really
very
nice.
exciting things for the future.
You know what would be fun on another video? Maybe it would be for you to give us a tour of the distillery and the cellars. That would be a fun video to do.
We're gonna
Sure.
keep working with this technology.
Great. All right.
No,
Okay.
Hey,
that's a-
David, it was really great seeing you. Thank you so much for doing this, even if it was only virtually. It's always good to see you and get in touch base with you. And
So this concludes our part 2 episode of French Whiskies. We hope you enjoyed it and perhaps learned a few things.
thank you for watching. For more information on our amazing French spirit brands, please check out our webpage listed below. And until then,
Au revoir and cheers, David.
thank you, David. Again, cheers.
Cheers. And Yermat, as we say in Brittany.
Yamats?
Can
What
you
is
say
it?
it again?
Yermat.
Yermat.
Yetmat.
Great.
All right.
We learned something.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yetmat with a double mat.